Good morning, everyone. My name is Nora Whittington, and I'm with the Immigration Partnership for Waterloo Region. I have been with the Waterloo Region Immigration Partnership since its inception, and today's speaker, in fact, has been with the Immigration Partnership as a passionate partner since the very beginning of the Immigration Partnership, which is approximately 14 years ago. The Immigration Partnership of Waterloo Region is a community collaboration of business, community services, government, education, and residents to build capacity for successful integration into our region. We have a staff team located in Kitchener, and we serve all of Waterloo Region. So we have a close partnership with the Cambridge Chamber of Commerce and Greater KW Chamber of Commerce and businesses and other organizations across the region. So we all work together to ensure that we can attract immigrants and to serve immigrants and refugees in our region through the work of our partners. Today, it gives me great pleasure to introduce Jennifer Roggeman. As I mentioned earlier, she's been very engaged in the Immigration Partnership work, and we've really enjoyed working with her over the years. So you're going to really enjoy her expertise today about immigration. Jennifer Roggeman was born in Seoul, South Korea, and came to Canada as a teenager. She completed her bachelor degree at the University of Guelph and received her law degree at the University of Victoria Law School. She started her law practice in 1998 as an articling student in Cambridge, Ontario, and as a general solicitor working in real estate, corporate commercial law, along with immigration law. And since mid-2012, Jennifer has been practicing exclusively in the area of immigration law, assisting families to reunite and strategically working with businesses to bring their skilled workers from outside of Canada. Jennifer has her own law firm called Roggeman Immigration Law. And I would like to welcome Jennifer now. Thank you, Jennifer, for taking your time today to do this.
Hi, Nora. Thank you. Thank you, everybody, for coming. And I noticed that we have about 10 participants. This is perfect. We can deal with all your questions much easier than when we have 100. So please feel free to ask a question with respect through the chat box or Q&A, and Melissa will help us to organize ourselves. So this topic of a hiring foreign worker is a really tough one, especially right now, because a lot of people are interested in doing. And I want to make sure that you're not doing this because this is a fashionable thing to do. There's a lot involved, and I find that a lot of employers is jumping in without having a good framework or the plan how they're gonna what they want out of the program, as well as where they are going from there. So before we start, I'm gonna put up the poll question, and if Melissa can help us to do the poll question number 1, why do you want to hire a foreign worker for your business? Does everybody know how to do the poll? So you just have to click. I think we are good to stop. So most of you said that you don't have Canadians who want to do the work in your field, lack of the available labor force. And some of you want you need a special skill from outside of Canada, and you need to create more work, creating work by having foreign workers. So what you actually have said was really the reality of a life right now, and the shortage of labor in a certain sector in our economy is really apparent. But what I noticed last 5 years, even including COVID, is more and more at the different businesses in general, from may that be an engineering job all the way to the construction worker, We don't have enough people to work at the employment we have for the population. So I thought about this topic, and I want to talk about what's important to you, who are the employers. Okay, so first, the section of the talk that I really want to focus on yourself. So, for example, that, what type of employer are you? So, are you a small business, have less than 10 employees, or are you an employer with 100 plus employees on payroll? I'm talking about, or are you kind of between 10 and 100? So, depending on the type of the employer, that your strategy for foreign worker will change. Because the immigration, ESDC, Employment Social Development Canada, which is the agency so looking after the sector, is looking at the size of your corporations. So in general, we'll say 10% of your payroll employees can be a foreign worker. So if you have a 10, you can have a 1. If you have 100, you can have a 10. However, since the COVID, one of the things that we notice is a certain sector of sector of economy that require more assistance than not. So, for example, construction field, manufacturing field, and you're probably going to laugh at this point. Is that, well, Jennifer, that's about 50% of our industry. Yeah, maybe. Those are industries that we can go up to that 30%. So if you have a 10 employees, it's a 3. If you have 100 employees, then 30%, that 30 employees you can bring in as a foreign workers. Now, just to remember, these percentages change without a notice. So right now, this is valid until the end of this year, but usually month or 2 or 24 hours, they may change the rules. So just to be aware of that. Second thing is that really talking about your company culture, or how many foreign workers are actually requires. So some people say, well, we just want to try for 1 and see what happens. Some people say, well, we need 30 people. I want to do it all at once. And some people, some employers said, well, we need 3 people, but 3 different jobs. So depending on that, your strategy changes. So if you have a particular occupation, I'm going to pick the construction laborer just because a lot of people are looking for that particular sector right now. But if there is a particular job you are dying to know about, please put it in the chat or the Q&A, and I can address it for sure. So if we're talking about the construction laborer, for example, that some people say, well, you know what, I'm looking for general laborer, Jennifer, but if 2 of them are more with a carpentry experience and 1 of them can be a little bit of the mechanical engineering, now you have to make a 3 application. So based on the job occupation, job or occupation, you have to go with a different applications. So if all 10 of them are same job, you have a 1 application with a 10 the foreign workers you can request. But if you want 2 of them as a dishwasher, 2 of them as a cook, and 2 of them as a server at the restaurant, you basically have a 3 application as the same employer. Now, another question that I get quite often is, which one comes first? Do I hire them first? Or do I get the approval first from the government, then hire them? So I call it classic chicken and egg problem. So in general, people started talking about this at 2 levels. The employers usually approach to us in 2 circumstances. One is, we have an amazing guy from ABC country we want to retain. So that's one kind of the employer that we want to proceed in that program. We have another type of employers, like, I have no idea, but we heard this is a great idea. We have nobody in lined up, but we wish to be in a place we can hire whoever comes up and without waiting. So there's 2 kinds. Some clients mix up all of them. So usually my recommendation is have your HR department, if you have one, and have some discussion. So big broad discussions of how does this going to work, because bring foreign worker is a bit different than Canadian worker. Canadian worker come and work well, you retain, hunky-dory, you go. But if you have a foreign worker, well, that foreign worker may not be in Canada yet. So you have to have some traveling transition plan. Then they are going to be a settlement problem. If they are inside of Canada, that they may not have a legal status in Canada. So if they have a legal status, we have to figure it out how to transitioning. If they don't have a status, we have to figure it out how to give them a status in a proper manner. Now, another thing that people talking about is that, what about the people already here on some kind of work permit? I don't know, but they come to me and said that they can work. A lot of times that those are they can be the people who have so in terms of work permit wise, in generally speaking, there's over 200 kinds, and we actually created as time comes. So that classic example you may know is because of a war in Ukraine, that we have given open work permit for a number of Ukrainian displaced population come to Canada. So they may have a work permit and the employer section is open, and they pretty much can work anywhere they want in Canada for any occupation at any wage, any time frame. Whereas when you have a closed work permit, which has a specific condition to that. So, for example, a classic closed work permit look like that. There is a foreign workers information, and we have a specific employer name, specific location. So if this is a national industry, national corporation, it may say that Montreal is the placement of employment with a right to travel, or there's a particular occupation saying that this person is only work as a mechanical engineer, for example. And a lot of times there's specific wage requirements, so which kind of makes the whole thing far more complicated than that. I think that another thing is that some people think, Jennifer, there's a thing called the start with a L something, and apparently I need to have it. That's not true, actually, because work permit itself is divided into two sectors. One is you require the labor market impact assessment, or we call it LMAI, or one, you don't need to have that. So how that changes really depending on what occupation we're talking about, as well as which country the employee, the desired employee is coming from. So again, that makes a huge difference, just because the labor market impact assessment takes some time, and also which nationality that your employee has, that creates what we call waiting time. So which no employer ever like a waiting period of time. Melissa, can we put up the poll 3 in terms of a waiting time? So this is the question with respect to how long are you willing to wait for your foreign worker to start working for you, from the day you decide to offer and the day they show up at your workplace. Excellent. So average look like is about 60% of the people said I can wait about a month. And the 30%, I think that's including 1 month, I said. So about 90% of you basically said as short as 1 month, as long as 6 months. And the one brave person says, as long as it takes. Excellent. So in terms of how long you can wait is really to do with your job and employees. So let me just deal with the job first. So job-wise, you have to decide what kind of skill set we're talking about. So it's not like your definition is set by the government of Canada. The name of the system is called the National Occupation Code. Now they went through some transition in November 2022, so which is within 6 months ago. Now they call it TER system, TER system. So it's divided into 6 different. And there's about 25,000 occupation, roughly speaking. So first thing you have to do is whatever job you come up with, you have to identify the job coding. So depending on the job coding, we can decide whether this is what we call like government defined as a high skill occupation or lower skill occupation. Simplest when I'm going to use the same occupation, construction laborer. They are qualified as a tier 5, which is the lowest skill sets. If I have a doctor, physician, they probably ended up at tier 1 or a tier 1 system. So it's just a matter of a lot of times broadly speaking, tier 1, 2, 3 is mostly you need to have a post-secondary education, have a decent English skill, have some kind of a license or skill set, and have some supervisory role or professional role or technical role to it. Tier 4 or 5, we're talking about lower end. These are the people who does a processing at the manufacturing assembly line. These are the people, nannies and farm workers, construction laborer, heavy equipment operator. We look at the people who actually dig the trench is where the tier 4 or 5 is. Now, once you get the skill set, second thing you have to figure it out, what kind of wages are we talking about? Now, there is a wages that again, Government of Canada kind of set it down by the job bank. That's a website that you have to really fall in love with, and nobody loves it. That's the program that you have to get through to. So once you figured out the skill coding, job coding, you can plug it into the job bank, to the wages system for your job occupation. Then they tell you on a geographical location. So for us, the Kitchener-Waterloo area, they will tell you what is a lower wage, medium wage, or the high wage. In order to go through the system, you must meet median wage. At this point, some of the desirable occupation or demand occupation, most employers actually pay more than median wages, so it's not a big deal. But some occupations, surprisingly, median wage is quite higher than the market rate. Then you get into troubles that, am I willing to pay this amount? Now, there is an arbitrary number. We call it a provincial median wage. So how that come about? Purely statistic. So they put all the wages in, divide by all the occupation, and come up with this arbitrary number and said, this is a median wage of the province of Ontario. So currently it's set at $26.04 per hour. Then what happened is everybody who get paid less than that is called a low wage occupation. Everybody who got paid is higher than that is high skill occupation. Why is this important? Why do we even care about this? There's two reasons. There's two extreme different the stream of the labor market impact assessment. When you get to the high wages, government doesn't really care how this person gonna settle when they come to Canada to work. So you don't have to do the housing issues, you don't have to deal with the transportation from their country of origin to Canada. And in terms of a recruitment effort that you have to put it in, how many places that you have to put your job post is only 3. So some people, if you are offering, let's say $24 an hour, by the time you do all the transportation, housing, etc., actually your actual dollar, you're going to pay your employees more than $26.04. But you are actually stuck with all the government red tape under the low wage. So sometimes we do some strategy with the employers. I say, okay, let's put down all the dollar figure and see which this makes sense. But bottom line is, you have to figure it out skill level first, then you have to figure it out the wage, and then, and this is a really important part, like I cannot emphasize more on this. Once you set the wage, you can't change. So I had a number of clients who make a job posting, and whatever happened and said, well, Jennifer, I know we kind of settled at the $27, but this guy had this and that, and we decided to give actual offer $28. And I'm like, nope, not going to happen. Then when that happened, you basically have to do your entire the advertisement all over again, and then make a lot of people very angry. So just to keep in mind that once you start entering into the system, you have to be very firm on what you're doing. If you're changing it, we have to come up with some creative way to get that compensation worked out. So that's really important. Now, then it has to be full time. So some client basically says, well, Jennifer, our company, for whatever reason, we start in April and we're done in December. Everybody take 3 months off. Those are a seasonal work, and seasonal work will not go through the process well. Now, Some of the job requirement Immigration Canada really care about is the level of English. So some clients, so basically what they do, so there's four classification of assessment in language system is a read, write, speak, listen. So even the lower skill, what they want to know is if they can listen and read. It sounds kind of funny because why do we care if they don't speak or not? But for some reason, the speaking is not on it. When they can listen your instruction, be able to read any of the notices or warning sign is really what's important for the lower skill. So if they can actually follow your instruction and to me is if somebody can listen English, they have a really minimum like speaking level. So that's something to consider. Some clients, especially that when we have a actual framework built for our employers, they do have some employees in their company who can speak certain languages, for example, French, Spanish, German, etc., who can assist in this process. But in general, you need to be able to have a basic conversation with the employee, so your foreign employee can actually understand what you want them to do. Again, another thing is that some employers are so desperate, especially in the construction area, and they say, Jennifer, I don't need this person to have any kind of a work experience. I want them to just show up for the day and actually do what needs to be done. The problem is that when you do the initial process of doing their labor market impact assessment, experience that we don't have to ask for, that's fine. But the problem is about the time you have to do the work permit application, what Immigration Canada is going to ask, I understand he doesn't need to have experience, but we need to know whether this person has a capacity and a capability to actually perform that work. Otherwise, a work permit is not going to be issued. So even though the experience is not required, sometimes I ask, what are the background? Like if this person was a mechanical engineer for 3 years, they're going to work for the construction laborer. I usually ask, okay, did he ever get onto the construction site to do any kind of mechanical engineering kinds of work? Did it ever do any kind of supervision? So I ask those as a background to make sure we can actually prove the capacity and the capability. Now, in terms of once you know the job, now you kind of figured it out yourself in terms of employer or where you fit it in. You kind of got your job classification, what is a skill, what is a wage, etc. And then we need to look at your actual employee. So this is where the also chicken and egg comes. So what happened is, I think one of the most important things that I look at the employee from an immigration lawyer's perspective, what is the nationality of the employee? So if we have, so for example, if somebody coming from Honduras and somebody coming from Mexico, very different treatment. So if an employee is from a country that Immigration Canada does not require entry visa to enter into Canada, we can do a lot more faster work than the visa required country. So for example, when we go through some of the COVID time, some of the employees, very qualified employees from India took 7, 8, 9 months, whereas if that person happened to be in Mexico, that person can jump on a plane and come to Pearson Airport and get a work permit at the border. So again, nationality is the first thing I ask where this person is from. Second thing is where the employees actually is. So if the employees already inside of Canada, sometimes work much faster and then when they're outside of Canada. So again, there's a transportation issue, there is a logistic issues in terms of a settlement issue. There are the things that we need to kind of work through there. Another thing is whether this employee is already working in Canada on some kind of capacity. So that person can be a international student who's working on a study permit, could be one. It could be that that person is working because his wife or husband is working, was studying at the local the educational institution. Or some countries that we have a special the International Experience Canada exchange program with I think last time I checked about 37 different countries, so they can come to Canada on a 1-year work permit or a 2-year work permit. Again, is open work permit. They can work wherever they want. If they already have a work permit, then we can transition them very easily for your company. Now, another thing we'll look at is a resume. Depending on which country they are from, again, depending on how well they are professional, the history look like, the resume can be very different. And I think the most important part is whether their work history and education history is valid and provable. So if anybody has right now education history from Ukraine, it's almost impossible to get any of the credential to be confirmed. If the work history wise, if the client may have a lot of work history, but half of them are closed down over the COVID, again, it's really difficult to figure it out how to build their work history. Now, this is something is a really challenge because it sounds really accusatory when I ask, and I'm not doing that for accusation. I'm just asking for the clarification. It's an eligibility issue. So basically, have you ever had a criminal record in your past and any past immigration violation with any country, especially United States? So one of the sometimes challenges with the clients are from Mexico, they do have the experience crossing the river, literally, as a child or otherwise. So those can be a triggering issues, even though this person is a perfectly legitimate employee and have Canadian employer to support, etc. But going through the process can be a challenging when there are issues that they have done in their past that needs to be worked out. Again, that I talked about this issue of a capability. Can this person do it? Now, some people, some employers basically said, Jennifer, I met the employee because he was in Canada on a vacation. So he actually looked at this machine and said, oh, we can do A, B, C, and D. And he was able to kind of put it together, this machine, like no problem. So yeah, we are okay with that. Great example of, how do you as employer know this person can work? But the problem is if an employee is outside of Canada, how can you be sure this person actually, used a shovel? You don't know. So sometimes it's worthwhile for some employer to bring the employee into Canada if a entry visa is not required, actually see whether that person can perform the work. I mean, that's kind of surety as to as an employer, this person can do the job. But if this person is from Sri Lanka and I can say Vietnam, and right now entry visa from Vietnam takes 751 days. That's 2 years over. It's worthwhile to even do anything. So a lot of the employers do the online interview. So some can do, some you don't know until they get here. So this is another question that a lot of employers ask is, Jennifer, we hired this person and we've gone through all this process and we spend the money. I waited 6 months. Finally, this person is here. And within 2 weeks, we found out he cannot do the job. Then what do we do? I usually say that your employment contract with your foreign worker is just like an employment contract with anyone. So there should be a probation time, should be a termination clause. And even though you spend this much money and effort, etc., that you as employer can let go this person as long as a notice, etc., is given. And I've seen that before. Now, the tricky part on that is because of their work permit is specifically closed work permit for your company specifically, that person cannot work anywhere else. So effectively, they become a visitor only. Some clients get a new work permit with a new employer with whatever process they have to go through, depending on the job they're looking for or job that they ended up getting. Sometimes if an employee comes with their spouse, and usually spouse can get the work permit, open work permit, that is valid work permit, regardless whether spouse or lose a job or not, then sometime they kind of carry over with the spouse and convert to the permanent resident or getting a new job, etc. Now, I think a major part is in general, if we have to go through the entire process of a labor market impact assessment and so on and so forth, right now, roughly speaking, I say about a week to figure it out exactly. Job, the skill set and wages that you put down all the administrative part. I would say if it's a fast client, about a week. There's a layer of the layer of authorization needs to be goes through. So bigger companies, that takes about 2 weeks to put the job posting in. Take about 4 weeks to do the proper advertisement. And once the advertisement is done, we probably need about 2 weeks to put together an application to get through. So that is a 2 month right off the bat. And then the processing time for the low and high skill set right now, you're looking at probably about 40 business days or 2 months. Now, this used to be really fast. Well, but the problem is a lot of people are using this system right now, number one. And two, we just had a 2 weeks strike in April. So, and ESDC was pretty much disrupted significantly. So there'll be some wait time for that. Depending on which country they are from, again, the work permit can be done at the border, which means they jump on a plane and come to Pearson Airport to follow we're done. Or this person, we need to go through the actual full work permit process. Let's say Philippines takes about 8 weeks right now, Honduras about 7 weeks. Most of Western countries, France, England, Ireland, Australia, New Zealand, etc., they again jump on a plane and can come and get the work permit at the Pearson Airport. But everywhere else is depending on the country of origin. It can be as long as 3-4 months, 5 months, depending on which post that we're talking about, or as fast as at the moment you finish the labor market impact assessment, you can work that out. So roughly speaking, if everybody does what they need to do and processing time at the ESDC is not as brutal as we talked about, 5 to 6 months is a pretty good time for the brand new employee from outside of Canada come to Canada and start work. I had some clients who have who were here and we had to go through the process, but if we can actually explain why this worker needs to work for you immediately, we can get a special authorization within 2 weeks to start to work. So we had a client who happened to be teaching children. And once we filed the work permit application in Canada, we basically send a special request in 2 weeks instead of a 4.5 months that he's supposed to wait for a brand new work permit. Within 2 weeks, he was able to start to work with the interim authorization. So that can be done. So there's a lot of little details and method we can do to facilitate. But again, it's really depending on the broadest as to how you put together this program so that it's not going to be it's going to go so smoothly as much as possible based on your occupation you're seeking to fill and the kind of employee you're going to have. Now at this point, I'm going to ask the most interesting question. What is your biggest stumbling block with respect to the hiring a foreign worker? Melissa, can you put up the poll, please? You can be honest on this. Nobody gonna look at this result. So looks like most of you, over 60% of you said, I don't know where to start and I don't even know how to do this. Or another 30% of you is that I know where and how, but I just don't have enough time. So perfect. So let me just talk about a little bit about the labor market impact assessment, because that's a really major reason a lot of people are here today. But if you are looking for the recommendation, Jennifer, where do I start? I'm happy to do the overview meeting. I do that with a lot of employers. So they basically come in and basically said, Jennifer, I have no idea where to start. I know where I want to go, but I just don't know where to start and the pathway to get there. And that's I usually meet with the person in charge as well as HR department. We just go through all the scenario. And especially if they have some employees that already they have in mind, then we can go through the entire process. Pretty easy. In terms of, I know where and how, I just don't have enough time. It depending on what kind of work you're looking at. So if your HR department is like so overloaded, there's no way they can keep up with the advertisement, for example, then there are facilities that we can work through that take you to where you need to go. So I think it's a matter of how badly you want to do this. And I think a lot of times the initial meeting is give you all the specific answer, the design just for your company, for the jobs that you are consider, and just for your employees in your mind. That's something we can work through. Now, in terms of a labor market impact assessment, let's say that this person is from India and that you want to hire him for the occupation is not going to go through anywhere but LMAI, let's say, for sake of argument. Labor market impact assessment is a very interesting process because a lot of employers basically said, Jennifer, I don't think they understand how badly I need people. It's not that they don't understand it. Their job, the ESDC's job is make sure that Canadians are protected. That's the bottom line. So I usually tell employers just change your framework. Change your framework is they're not actually trying to make your life difficult for you, the employer. They're basically saying our role and mandate and purpose of this particular project is we want to make sure Canadians gets the first dip at your job. If there's nobody else, then yes, you can go ahead. So when they said there's nobody else, that's where the stumbling block. So you need to meet the 3 requirements to be successful in labor market impact assessment. Number one and 2 is really easy. Number 3 is where everybody gets screwed over. Number 1 is this job real? And a lot of people are going to say, are you kidding me, Jennifer? But it did happen. So for example, would you hire a lawyer for a convenience store? Of course not. But some people did in the past. Okay, so they want to know that kind of a job you are offering to this foreign workers. Are they make sense? Does it make sense to your company? So, for example, construction laborer for a construction company. Of course, it makes sense because they need those to operate. Hiring accountant or bookkeeper for accounting firm. Well, that makes sense. So they want to know if job is a genuine job. Number 2. Does the job the job description requirement and the eligibility as well as the pay compensation you give is comparable to Canadian worker? So for example, that's why they want to make sure it's the median wage. But once in a while, you're getting to really the funky, weird situation. So for example, you have, let's say, 30 laborer in your company, but you want to hire 5 more. But 5 more is on the median wage of $22 an hour. But most of your Canadian workers are working in $25 an hour. Then immigration is like ESDC going to say, well, you're bringing cheap labor from wherever you're bringing in. You need to match it. So sometimes what we have to do is we have to create the different classification. So for example, all your current workers, they've been there more than 3 years, be able to do 5 different things, whereas brand new people, no experience, they have no skill set or they cannot operate a forklifter, for example. So that's sometimes is tricky. Also, another part is sometimes that is a higher occupation. So we had a situation that we want to do the higher occupation executive in, and he was in a level with 5 other Canadian executive. And we decided to do a regular LMAI process because he was from a country requiring visa. And it turns out he was getting 10% more than the rest of the executive. So I get a call day 2 of the advertisement, and by the CEO of the company is like, Jennifer, no, this is not going to work. I have to raise everybody's 10%. It's not going to work. So sometimes we have to actually think about that, even though it's a higher level, sometimes we have to come up with another solution than the advertisement. And at the end of the day, everybody hates advertisement as an employer. So, but it is the major requirement. So let's talk about a valid recruitment effort. That's the number 3 criteria for the labor market impact assessment that a lot of people are really stressed out about. Recruitment is really showing that you have tested a labor market for your job. That's just the bottom line is. So they want to make sure the job description is clear, there is a wage, the compensation, and there's where the location is, what are the eligibility or requirement for the job. Now, this is a fine. Everybody actually kind of like all the employers are like, oh yeah, that's what we do for job posting. The problem is that you have to put it in the right location. So good old days of some clients, especially construction companies, Jennifer, I put the job posting on my door. I'm like, no, that's not going to work. So these days, the post on the door is your website. If you put it on the website, we may count as one, okay? The bottom line is you have to post all your job on the job bank. And nobody likes the job bank, and nobody loves the job bank, but that's just the way it is. So that's the one is a mandatory. You're stuck with that one. Then this is where I talked about the median provincial wage of $26.04. So if this is a higher wage, it doesn't matter what kind of skill set, but it's a higher wage, you have to do the 3 places. So usually I recommend job bank, national website, the job website, alljob.ca, allstar.ca, whatever. And the third one is a local, like Indeed, Kijiji, LinkedIn, for example. So that's all you have to do. But if you're under 2604, not only that, you have to put 2 more places. And it's not anywhere, it's a very specifically targeted group. So ESDC basically defined there is a 4 kind of a group of people is underrepresented in our workforce. So people with a disability, the young people, young adult, and what they call a young adult at risk. I just call it young adult in general, and indigenous people and the newcomer to Canada. So those are the 4 groups. And basically you have to pick 2 who can work the best in your workplace. So in the end, you have to do the 5 location for any jobs you're paying under $26.04. So once that's all done, so we start counting 4 weeks. That has to be simultaneously on. Then you have to track them all. So maybe it be an email, the resume application, or they click on the job bank, however they come. This is where you have to do the clear tracking. Once the tracking is done, then you have to report what happened. So for example, one employer that I did, they had 120 applicants. They actually sent the email to every single of them for an interview because they didn't require any experience. Only about 30 people reply back for an interview. And about 10 people showed up, and they offered a job to, I think, 7 of them. 3 of them couldn't do particular heavy lifting. So they offer 7 people, and only 2 people accepted, and only 1 person showed up, and that person quit after 2 weeks. If you feel like, oh my goodness, that's my case, you're not alone. There are many clients going through that particular process. So what ESDCs want you to do is write that down. That this is how much work I have done to hire Canadian workers and didn't work. Then once you have all this along with all your required documents, you have to make an online labor market impact assessment application. Yes, it is online, and it's going through job bank website. So again, this is your favorite like app of a year if you decide to do this. And once it's go in, usually like some of the established employers that we have worked with, usually within a month we get it back. But if there are some issues, it may take up to 2 months right now. The regular processing is that. Now, I see a couple of questions. Okay, I toured a family physician from UK wants to move here. Identify clinic here, one here that says to advertise a job bank. Well, okay. First of all, in terms of the physicians have a special LMAI process. So it's not the regular one. So I'm not going to talk about it here. But if you look at the Labor Market Impact Assessment website and ESDC website, they actually have a specialized LMAI design for a physician, because a lot of physicians have a different kind of occupation, so they don't actually work for a clinic. It's sort of a self-employed in association stuff, so it's quite different. So just be aware of that. I think there's two people, same person asked the same question. It's kind of related question, so I just want to do quick do the answer right there and then. Now, let's say we're all done. Yay! We have employee in your company, start working. You're happy with the work. Everything is hunky-dory good. Here's a final problem you encounter. Work permit is limited in time. It's not a forever work permit, unfortunately. So it can be as short as 1 year, as long as 5 years. In general, any of a lower code, tier 4 or 5, you get 2-year work permit. And the higher code, you get 3 years. If somebody's so special, they usually get 5 years, but it's been a while I've seen the 5-year work permit. So in general, you can assume between 2 to 3 years of work permit. So they came and start working. Now the timeline goes down the drain, meaning is that you have a time clock running. What do you want to do at this point? So a lot of people usually wait about 6 months. Okay, 6 months, and basically says they basically says that I'm gonna see if this is gonna work. Makes sense. Okay, but after 6 months, you have to make some decision as to where you're gonna go next. Whether you're gonna support this employee to complete your like become a permanent resident and retain them, or that after 2 years or 3 years, will you go through this process all over again to renew the work permit? And some work permit, there's a limitation as to how long you can extend. So limit sometimes can be 5 to 7 year limitation on it. So I had some clients who said, well, we can do this forever, Jennifer. It's like, no, it doesn't work that way. So it's a specific occupation and the kind of a treaties we work through. So that's to keep in mind. Ontario government have a special work permit just for the Ontario employer to support their foreign workers. And there's 3-4 kinds of it, depending on the occupation and depending on the qualification of employee. If your employee is over 35 in age, just one post-secondary education and English is somewhat shaky, they cannot go through the regular process of a skilled worker application, because right now is a very competitive. So 9 out of 10 cases, you as employer has support them become a permanent resident, just to keep in mind. Now, somebody asked about the study permit and the temporary increase in hours. So prior to, I think, the end of last year, that if somebody's on the study permit, they can work outside of their campus 20 hours per week anywhere. Now, because of a shortage of work, etc., government just increased the hour to the full time, but that is until the end of this year. So after this year, what are they going to lift that 20 hours completely or not? We have to wait and see. Another thing is that study permit holder is really important that you have to make sure they are fully registered and going to school. And so you're going to be a mama and daddy for these workers, because if they don't go to school and get kicked out of their program, you cannot keep them as a worker. So in order to work as students, they have to be fully registered full time. Okay. I have another question. Is somebody is lives in China, has applied for open work permit, they should receive a June, make them an offer of employment prior to. To me, is that person needs to get into Canada first. So when they get an open work permit, they apply outside of Canada so somebody from China, they need to have an entry permit to Canada. They cannot come directly with the passport alone. So what they have to do is when they apply for this work permit, they will get an entry permit to come to Canada. So this is the weirdest system. Some people say, well, Jennifer, I don't understand that one. Work permit, is to work. Study permit is to study. However, you need to enter into Canada in order to work and study. That's why sometimes you need all three permits. So somebody from China may have a study permit, but they need to have an entry permit to enter into Canada to study. It's just the way it is. And then what happened over the time is they may renew their study permit or work permit. They forgot to renew their entry permit. They have to. Otherwise, they are studying and working. They go to Cuba for have fun. And when they try to come back, they cannot get into Canada because they don't have an entry permit. Yeah, I've seen those students in the past. So whoever thought that, that going to a vacation can be a problematic, but it can be a problematic. When you talk about so I'm going to just go back to the job offer for a second as an employer, because this is really, really important. Why would you do that as an employer? You're going to spend money on an employee, potentially may not stay with you. So why would I do this? So if somebody basically says did a really good job and you want to keep them working for you exclusively, okay, it's a great option to do. So once you are qualified, you need to meet the 4 qualifications. One is that you have to running your company for at least 3 years. 2, you need to have a minimum 3 Canadian or permanent resident as employees on a payroll on your company, other than your foreign worker. Then your minimum gross sale or gross revenue for the company in the last fiscal year has to be $500,000 or over per foreign worker. And the job you're offering to this foreign worker is necessary to operate your company. So that's kind of roughly the requirement. So let's say you decide to do this, okay, and your employees is qualified, you're qualified, you make an application. You have to wait until Ontario government select you. So it's a random occupation, and there's a scoring system you have to go through. Once you get invited, you have 12 days. That's it. 12 days, okay, to register the application online. You gotta meet this 12 days, otherwise your invitation is nullified, okay? Just I want to emphasize that. Once you register, it takes about 3 to 4 months for Ontario government to grant you certificate of nomination for your employee and approve you as a employer who's supporting employee. From that time, they have 6 months to make a permanent resident application to federal government. Now, that process takes about 2 years, and only employer they can work is your company. If whatever reason, you have to let go this employee, their entire permanent resident application fall apart. So legally, you can dismiss this employee. Morally, ethically, if you enter into this relationship, you have to be willing, able, and ready to support this employee for minimum 3 years at your employment in order to work. So if you include the initial 2-year work permit, then 6 months Ontario program, 2.5 years. So in other words, you have 5 years that you have this employee in your company in that occupation exclusively. So that is the biggest benefit employers Ontario employers have to go through that program, and which is one of your retention program. And I tend to find a lot of times that they tend to stay with you for a very long time, and I find that a lot of employees who receive the support from their employer, they are quite loyal employees in general. I'm speaking. Okay, so what I talked to you today is literally not even a 0.25% of the entire thing, because I try to talk about as broad as possible and to meet everybody's needs, especially some of you are I'm interested, but I'm not exactly sure where to even begin, Jennifer. So I hope this is going to give you a little bit of a perspective as how much this is involved. But because I talked about so big, right now you may think, I feel so overwhelmed because there's so many balls in the air. How do I do this? This is where you need a little bit of expert advice as to how that work for you exactly and works with you step by step to complete the process. But this is an excellent way to increase your labor, especially the jobs that you already know you have a lot of stress on. And we're talking about the timeline as keeping somebody for over 5 year more. It is a substantial increase in your labor sustainably. So I think before you dismiss, I think it's really important that you check if this is something you can actually work through. What is the damages, or what is the downside if something goes wrong? You can assess and see if this will support your overall HR, the support. If there is any more question I can address, but I left it about 5 minutes to make sure that if I miss anything at this point. And I think it's overall speaking, you have to kind of keep in mind that we have 3 educational institution in Kitchener-Waterloo area. We have a substantial amount of international students who's seeking employment, especially from an employer who is interested in supporting them through the permanent resident application. I think it's important that even if you don't bring anybody from outside of Canada directly, you need to understand that what is the process look like, and make sure that, because a lot of times the students may say, oh, can you just sign on this piece of paper and that's all you have to do. It's actually a lot more involved, and I get a lot of inquiry from employers that, oh, I have a really smart student so we want to support, and she said this is the only thing I have to do. And we actually explore the idea as to, are you like, is she or he is good at what his job or her job, and are you interested in keeping this person up to 2 to 3 years? If answer is yes, let's go. If his answer is not, that then you have to kind of I find that, like, at the end of the day, like, don't have any surprise. I'd rather know what I'm getting into before I jump into. I'm kind of very strategic person, I suppose. Somebody asked, what is the process for someone who's working in Canada for 2 years after schooling, want to apply for residency? Does involve employer? Yes and no. A lot of times they are very good position because they finished the school in Canada and have working for 2 years. They should be able to transfer. Most likely the reason they cannot do is because their occupation, the 2-year work they did, is not meeting the requirement, or their English level is really low. Or they are older, mature students. So those are the 3. On those cases, that certainly employer can assist them through the transition for sure. And somebody asked, how do I reach you? That's my office. Feel free to Google me and check me out. And you heard what I need to say today as well. So, as I said, this was really general information and broadly applicable for pretty much every employer. But what you are looking for is a very specific. Then certainly reach out to us, and happy to chat with you on what you need. And I find that also that if you have a foreign worker as a student or otherwise, it's somebody who worked with you for 2 years, just like one of the questions that I saw, you get to know these people. You know who's their mom and who's their kids, and they come out to barbecue and start having a relationship. And in that sense, that they are no longer just employee, but they're employee with the relationship, and everybody want to help. And I think that's one thing that's great about the Canadians in general, that I have so many employers. It's like, Jennifer, I know this is kind of pretty difficult, but I know this person for how many, and I know their situation, and I know how hard they work, and we not only we want to keep this employee, but we want to help them. And I think that that mindset is always helpful to go through the tough the process and time. I think that's where I think that's why these foreign workers and students and foreigner want to come to Canada, because of that culture of a relationship, that culture of helping each other. So you can be part of that.
Jennifer, there's just another question that came through the Q&A. I'm not sure if you saw that last one.
Yes, it was about the physician again. Yeah, feel free to reach out to us and ask a specific question. It's just that the physicians are very, very different category. So it's a little bit different than what we talked about. Today I talked about all general items.
Perfect. Thank you so much. And thank you to everyone for joining us today. Have a good afternoon. Thank you.
Okay, bye-bye.